Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗃, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategy. 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗃.
And welcome to the Halloween program for Real Estate Radio Live. God, love that Ghostbusters. You could be sound asleep, but you get up and boogity down.
Who are you going to call?
Dancing. Okay. I have got a great program. Actually, Buddy and I thought of this at the beginning of the week and thought, you know, it's not often that Halloween actually comes almost on the Friday that we have to be here.
That's true.
That's so true. And so we're going to take advantage of it. And we're going to talk about haunted houses this week and all the other normal stuff. But Joe, again, is off and running. He's got such a busy schedule, but he'll be here much more often in November. So you will be very, very surprised at some of the places that we have been able to find that are actually considered haunted houses. And I actually have a story for Buddy that even though I've been with him 26 years, he doesn't know about this. And once we started doing it, brought back fond memories and funny memories. But, you know, think about the Bay Area. Think about all the history. We went through the gold rush, Buddy. We went through all kinds of things. And so today's program is kind of sorted to figure out which is which. How do you like that?
It's a double entendre. Which, W-I-T-C-H.
Yes, spooky is the operative word. But, you know, from misty figures in the fog to things moving around to things levitating, you know, everybody, oh, yes. And Jeremy, thank you, with all the sound effects. We're going to keep this going.
Oh, yeah.
So, Buddy, how do we know that we have frighteningly ghostly haunted houses?
Well, we've had the opportunity to stay in one that had 22 ghosts recognized. 17 were recognized by a paranormal association as being registered ghosts. Let me tell you the story.
Okay.
Ta-da! So we were up in Gold Country. We were working on a ranch, getting all of our information together to put our marketing program together with the ranch up in Gold Country. And we were near the old Hotel Jeffrey, which is right there in Coulterville. And we decided we'd stay that night because we were pretty tired, pretty exhausted after working the trails all day, so to speak. So during the time when we stopped for a slight libation at the bar, the innkeeper shared some of this information with us. Yeah, there are 22 ghosts in the hotel. It was built in 1851 and burned down 3 times before 1889. And then it's been reconstructed several times. They had a fire last year, and they're working on repairing it again. So as I mentioned, 17 of these ghosts are registered by an official paranormal group.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I didn't know you could register your ghosts.
Paranormals are busy. You know, we just live in a very, very unique and bizarre world. I mean, if you start thinking about that, Bud.
Yeah, well, the paranormals love to go up there and go through all the things that are there. These folks that we talked with were kind of new owners, and they said their only real experience so far had been that the silverware on the table set up in the dining room would move, and nobody on the staff claimed any responsibility for moving it. So it's pretty scary stuff. But we were going to spend the night and get a little relaxation and enjoy the evening after we had time in the oldest bar in California is in that hotel, the Magnolia. Mm-hmm. But then you had a little something you wanted to communicate with the ghosts that day. Could you share that with us?
Yes. I get very cranky at the end of the day if my days are 10 hours or 11 hours, especially when it's 100 degrees outside. So we were able to get the one of 2 rooms that actually has working air conditioning, which was a score. And then the fact that I was so tired, they said, well, you might hear some rattling in the hallway, nothing big, no problem. Well, the air conditioning was so noisy that I didn't hear any rattling. But prior to closing the doors, I said, look, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want, but don't bother me tonight because nothing is scarier than Bobby without a good night's sleep. And it worked.
Yeah, none of them seemed to.
Nobody
stir.
showed up. Nobody showed up. You had a great night's sleep.
Yeah, of course, I made the comment that, if all the people that have seen all these ghosts up there, it is attached to a bar. I wonder if that has any possible impact.
I think that so much action. Yes, the fact that they're hallucinating after all the cocktails.
How many ghosts can you see in one night? Well, it might depend on how many cocktails you've had.
Well, we're going to get back here to San Jose and the Winchester Mystery House. And it's kind of sad because Sarah Winchester was very distressed that her dad or husband?
I thought it was her husband.
Okay. Had the Winchester rifle, and that it had killed so many people, and it was really not intended, I guess, more for hunting rather than killing. But she was just the kind of soul that really, really bothered her. And she felt as though the spirits would come and haunt her forever, so she needed to keep building and building. I love that tour. I've been on that tour a number of times, and it is fabulous. A little bit spooky when you get down into the lower parts of the house.
And stairs to nowhere.
Stairs to nowhere, absolutely. And you've got the real-looking apparitions spotting throughout the grounds. And once an employee arrived to work and found his desk completely soaked with water while nothing else around him was wet. Those kind of things would kind of spook me out. But I also think that the story behind it, the fact that she didn't want to stop because the spirits would then be able to find her. If she continued to build, they'd have to guess what part of the house she was in. But then there's a kind of fun one at the Moss Beach Distillery in Moss Beach.
Well, that's a lot of our local favorites because you can go sit outside and look out into the ocean, and they've always done a great job with their food. But let me give you a little bit of background. So that was the distillery was built in 1927, and it was frequented by bootleggers, silent film stars, and, of course, politicians. They all match up together, don't they? Mm-hmm. The Moss Beach Distillery was originally called Frank's Place back then. It drew in all sorts of characters. One, according to an old legend, was the Blue Lady, and they have pictures of her as you come into the bar part. Yes, that's the Blue Lady, who in her 40s or 50s met a dangerous man, and despite already being married, fell in love with him. She frequently made trips to Frank's to see him until one night when she was walking on the beach with her lover, and someone attacked them, killing the Blue Lady and leaving her lover with injuries.
You sound like Perot.
Since then, the distillery has received phone calls with no one on the other line, seen room doors mysteriously lock, and items levitate. Now, that levitating's a big deal, right?
Yes.
And most curiously, perhaps, are instances of women losing single earrings only for them to turn up at one point in one pile. All different ladies.
Later, right,
Whoa.
all together. I know, it's very, very strange.
Well, but they do have great drinks. Again.
I have to tell you, between you and Jeremy, I'm going to have to really, really, really script this tight. Okay, so who would buy a haunted house? There was a 2013 study done, and I couldn't believe, actually, that it had been done, but people are curious about all kinds of things, and this is with NAR. And more than half of the home buyers are open to buying a haunted house, according to Realtor.com 2013 Haunted Housing Report. Now, 35% of nearly 1,400 people who took this survey say that they have lived in a haunted house. It says our data reveals that while a majority of consumers are open to purchasing a haunted house, many buyers conduct research on a home's history to be aware of any weird instances. And I think this kind of comes back to these good castles, bad castles in Europe.
Yeah,
if you've got a good ghost, then you've got value. If you've got a bad ghost, then you're probably going to have to sell it for a whole lot less, Additionally, Realtor.com data finds that while some respondents are willing to purchase a haunted home at a discounted price, many say that levitating objects, ghost sightings, and objects moving from place to place would probably deter them from purchasing a home. So I think it's the romance of thinking you want a ghost, but when one really shows up, you kind of, your hair a little stands on end on the back of your neck.
Yeah, and the report went into a little bit more extensive dialogue about some of those instances that would make people shy away from purchasing the haunted house, even though they said they were people that would purchase a haunted house.
Right.
Well, I mentioned earlier levitating is a big deal. 75% of the people said that if they had levitating objects, they weren't buying in, no matter what the deal was. 63% said objects being moved from where they were and placed someplace else is another big deal, like we talked about at the Hotel Jeffrey. And 63% said ghost sightings. Well, what do you want a haunted house for if you haven't got ghosts? 61% said supernatural sensations. 61% flickering lights and appliances. 60% strange noises. Well, of course you have to have strange noises if you're going to have a haunted house. And 34% said warm or cold spots would change their perspective on it. So my take is that some of those people that said, oh, yeah, sure, I'll buy a haunted house, I don't think they were that genuine, because there's too many reasons for them to be scared. And all those things that we just talked about are reasons why you know it's haunted. How do you know it's haunted if none of those exist?
Well, people say one thing and do another. That has always been the case throughout mankind. And I know that we're going to be coming back and dealing with a couple of other places that are haunted, whether they be, a ship or a house or whatever. But our listeners are going to have a fun Friday ride into the Halloween weekend. They sure are. And also, I want to make sure that November 2nd is November 3rd, Tuesday, November 3rd, is the last meeting at the Toll House, and I will give you all the data when we return from our next break. So stay with Real Estate Radio Live and more haunted news. We'll be right back. We've missed Joe. He's one of our right-hand guys, and he's just been on the fly this past month of October. I want to make sure that I announce his last gathering of the year. It's November 3rd. It's from 3 to 4 with the live show. And then 4 to 6 is networking, and it's at Verge at the Toll House Hotel at 140 South Santa Cruz Avenue in Los Gatos. Who is welcome? All are welcome. They want the industry professionals, community members, neighbors, friends, and your financial foundation is going to be discussed. The 5 building blocks for life. And it's featuring Kristen Niedermeyer, who is a financial advisor, Pacific Advisors. She's a really, really interesting lady, and I think that once you hear her, you're going to realize that this quote, "Wealth is the ability to fully experience life," by Henry David Thoreau, really does matter. So we hope that you're going to be there. Remember, November 3rd, 3 to 6. So, Buddy, we're back here, and what are we going to talk about next with our hauntings?
Well, not all things that are haunted are houses. In fact, we have probably one of the most famously haunted locations on the big list in the local area, and maybe even around the United States, the USS Hornet in Alameda, that grand aircraft carrier. It's spectacular. Bobbi and I have been through it a few times and really have enjoyed the tours. They actually have a tour that offers mystery tours, exploring many of the historical legends, including stories of long-deceased sailors, spirits who are frequently seen around the aircraft carrier. But we've got something special here. We have one of the tour of the Hornets we took with a wonderful officer that served on the Hornet. And he's an officer and a gentleman, Mr. Max Branson. And Max is going to give us a little bit of insight because he knows this boat intimately. Max, welcome.
Thank you, buddy. Glad to be here.
Hey, so give us some insight as to why you know this boat so So close up and personal.
Well, sure.
And pardon me, that was ship.
That's right. We were corrected many times. I was just trying to flag him down here at the studio.
She was looking over at me. It's not a boat, it's a ship.
No, I was corrected many, many times. It is a ship.
Right. Anyway, I was ordered aboard the ship in 1964 after I'd been in the Navy for 10 years, and it was just part of my typical career pattern. And I was a pilot on the ship, although my job was a member of the ship's company. And the USS Hornet was ordered into the shipyard over here at Hunters Point. And I lived aboard the ship while it was being worked on. The plan was for about 6 months. So I had plenty to do and time to do it, and I could go anywhere on the ship, and I had access to the ship's plan. So I set off to get into every space on the ship, if at all possible. And I just pretty nearly made it. I'm sure there's a spot or two that I missed. But as I was roaming around the ship, I came across some interesting things. Remember, the Hornet was launched during World War II and served in the war in the Pacific. And so there's a lot of things happened, and many of them wonderful, but a lot of them really, really bad. But so I was going through the ship. You could see evidence of things that had gone on there. But I was kicking around one supply area, and they're called voids because it's where the ship, the shape of the ship is sharp, and metal and rooms have to be square. So they have these voids. So I opened the hatch to one of them and peeking around the flashlight, and it was oh my goodness, there's a bunch of caskets in there.
Oops.
And
do.
yes, that was a little bit of a shocker. I was just expecting an empty space. And so I looked around, and obviously it was where the supply department stored the caskets. And I didn't actually go in and kick around to see if there's anybody in them. But,
no.
Well, that's probably a good idea.
Don't bother with that. Thank you very much.
You know, hang on to that casket thought, Max, because we need to break for another show. Okay. Sponsor, and then we shall be back to Real Estate Radio Live. Hang in there with us for some more spooky stories, because we certainly do have a bunch of them.
Caskets are a good exit.
They're always a good exit on Halloween, day before Halloween, absolutely. So come on back to Real Estate
RadioLive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Here we go. I gotta love that music. Jeremy, you are very, very clever and creative. So if you would like to listen to us at www.𝗘𝗀𝗏.biz, that's live streaming, and you just hit that listen live button, or you can call in if you've got any of your own haunted house stories, 1-800-516-1220. That's 1-800-516-1220. Or you can text me if you don't want to call in, and that's at 650-346-5352. But if you got a couple of stories, jump in the fun. Halloween only comes once a year. So we're going to toss it back to Buddy, and he can toss it back to Max.
Okay, so as we went to break, we were on the USS Hornet, and Max was taking us through the cavernous areas of the ship and wound up in the coffin department. Oh my.
Okay. Yeah.
So Max,
I said I didn't.
You got us into that room, but I think there's lots of other stories. Did you ever see anything more scary than that? But I also know there's a bunch of stories. If you haven't seen anything scarier, tell us some of the stories about the other scary stuff.
Well, I think the scary parts come with the darkness that you find on the inside of the ship. Because if you're down in the bowels of the ship, why, usually there's lots of lights and things, but when it goes out, there's no way for any light to get in from the outside. So I always carry a flashlight, and even when I go out to visit the Hornet while it's a museum, the lights can still be turned off, and you're in there in a space. But with the lights out, it's super dark, and the ship is noisy. It's a living animal, so to speak, and there's steam going and pipes banging and things like that, and so you hear very, very weird things that possibly could be explained. And I was not the Ghostbuster on the ship, so I just kind of stayed out of it. But on smaller ships and even on the carrier, as when you're at sea, why the ship rolls. And typically, the dishes and things move around. And speaking of levitating, one time it was probably not natural, but my typewriter levitated off of my desk in my office and smashed on the floor, and that was kind of the last that ever worked very well. That was super spooky.
That levitation had to do with a big wave, I suspect. Yes.
Well, that was my theory, but it was interesting.
I'm sure it was, because you're I find that naval officers are very calm. They're very military. Nothing shakes you up very easily.
Well, and a pilot, too. You have to be very concentrated on the facts of the matter. You have to have nerves of steel.
We're great actors.
Well, listen, Max, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing those stories with us, because I know that, that's a big ship. I've been on it, and if it ever got dark while I was down below, I'd have a heart attack and die, and I'd be another ghost.
Yeah, Bobbi would have found a stairway somehow and been out of there in a nanosecond. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is a fabulous place to go tour. Make sure you go to see the Hornet.
And thank you for joining us, Max.
Well, you're certainly welcome, and have a happy Halloween.
And back at you. Now, we're going to break for a quick commercial break once again, so stay tuned for the rest of Real Estate Radio Live. We're going to finish up with some more haunted houses here in the Bay Area and wish you an extremely happy Halloween. And I'll also give you more information about that last meeting of the year to be held at the Toll House. See you shortly.
On today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Max to come in and tell us a little bit about, such an
Hornet,
enormous place.
Yes.
I was blown away by how big it is. And I remember a story that he told me, that when he was learning how to land on it, they said he was up in his plane, and they said, you will go and land at the Hornet below. And he basically looked down, and he said it was the size of a pin. And he's like, I have to land this jet on that pin. Of course, as you get closer to Earth, it gets a whole lot bigger. But I still, when I see movies that show how they come out and latch and all that, that's nerve-wracking. Yeah. Okay, well, I actually do have a house that I actually sold, buddy. And this is the one I never really told you about, and I'm kind of puzzled as to why not.
Well, you didn't tell me any ghost stories on other Halloween Eves.
No, I guess not. But actually is on the peninsula in the Millbrae-San Bruno area. And we were getting ready to close escrow, and suddenly the buyer backed out. She just simply backed out, burst into tears, couldn't sign the papers. I was representing the seller. We really didn't know quite what we were going to do because it had never happened before. And I was kind of new to real estate at the time, maybe 5 years into it. And she just walked out hysterically crying, I just can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, and wouldn't tell anybody why she couldn't do it. So her agent actually bought the home. It was back in the days where, they might have been 100,000, 150,000, but the agent was able to pull the monies together and buy it herself. And so later on, about 2 months later, I take the seller, the agent, and myself, we all go to lunch. I was sitting there, and I said, whatever happened to your buyer? I'm really happy you were able to step in, but what happened to your buyer? And she said, there was a ghost. There's a ghost that lives there, and she saw it, and she just doesn't want to live in a house with a spirit. And I said, oh, that's just ridiculous. And my seller goes, oh, no, but he's very, very friendly. He's taken care of my daughter and myself for years, and we're just kind of happy to have him there. And I'm like, You didn't disclose a ghost, but back, 30 years ago, buddy, disclosure was not as hot button that it is today.
Yeah.
And that was in and of itself quite spectacular. And we had an earthquake after that. And we were up in this, right there, right at lunch.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
I
will never, ever not believe a ghost story again.
Yeah.
But all is well. Thriller. So that is my personal ghost story.
Well, there's lots of other ghost stories, and I'm going to take you over to the South Bay for a couple of them. One is Great America. The park at Great America in Santa Clara. Great America, of course, is ripped with grotesque stories of theme park accidents, as probably most theme parks are. But one of the most frequently reported is a ghost of a boy who was killed on a ride and near the game section there. And allegedly, he appears often to people in the park.
Mm-hmm.
So the employees have spotted him, visitors have spotted him. So I don't know if he's registered or not. We'd have to find out. Then, of course, there's the Agnew Development Center in Santa Clara, the former Agnew Insane Asylum. Of course, we'd suspect some ghost stories, some haunted stories to come out of that. Yeah. Because it was built in 1885. And was built, of course, for the mentally ill and the mentally disabled. During the 1906 earthquake, one of the larger buildings on the campus collapsed, killing over 100 people. So that was a pretty bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was rebuilt in 1911 and continued to operate, eventually being placed on the National Registry of Historic Places. It closed in 2011 as we knew it, but now it's an Oracle campus. What fun.
There you go. Everything happens in Silicon Valley. Yeah, if you don't believe it, just live here for a little bit.
Ghost writing code, I guess, supposedly.
Oh,
so Bobbi, what's going on in the city?
Well, in the city, you've got the Queen Anne Hotel. It originally opened in 1890 as a school for girls, offering etiquette classes to the upper crust of the city. And then almost a decade later, it became an exclusive gentlemen's club. Finally, it became a hotel where it exists today. Nowadays, the hotel, and particularly room 410, so that's room 410, down south in San Diego at the Grand Dame Hotel, over there on Del Coronado,
yes.
The Del Coronado Hotel. There's one room that's supposed to be
that's right, too.
Remember?
When we were there, they were telling us about
People
that. Yes.
wait years to
stay in that
it.
haunted room.
A room 410 in this particular hotel, that's Queen Anne Hotel, said to be haunted by Miss Mary Lake, who was the head of the girls' school because she wasn't ready to give up her school when it was purchased. So, a woman scorned.
Well, I've got one of the other big ones, Alcatraz. Everybody knows Alcatraz, and probably the most famous haunted establishment in the Bay Area. Alcatraz Island was formerly an infamous prison housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals, including Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. Its past is very storied and includes all sorts of eerie happenings, from the clanging sounds, the smell of smoke, and even the sound of strummed banjo Al Capone used to play.
Oh,
my.
I think that you've missed your calling with telling stories on radio.
Oh, here's Al Capone in the background. See, the ghost is local today.
Yes, I think his name is Jeremy. Well, with that, we're going to go to our final break, our final commercial break, and then we will come back with a couple of more stories. And if you have any of your own, please give us a call. We would love to hear from you. And those of you who are spectacularly shy,